John, nice to meet you.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, how are you doing?
I'm doing well.
So today we have John Nowels, who's running for Spokane County Sheriff in the wake of Ozzie retiring. John, what has prompted you to run, obviously, aside from Ozzie retiring, what has prompted you to run for sheriff?
So being a lifelong resident of Spokane and an employee of the Sheriff's Office for the last 25 years, I've progressively worked up through the ranks of the department into leadership positions, eventually landing as an undersheriff 3 years ago and being an appointed executive command staff member for the last 7. And Ozzie had talked about maybe retiring in his last term. And when he started talking about that, I had a conversation with a couple other men I have a tremendous amount of respect for about their potential candidacy and telling them that, you know what, if you want to run for sheriff, I will be one of the best undersheriffs or command staff members you've ever had. I think you've got, what it takes to be a great sheriff. And both of those men stepped back and said, no, you run for sheriff. We're not interested in that political arena. Mm-hmm. We'll support you. And so at that point, I thought, I have the qualifications, I have the drive and the skills necessary to lead the community and a desire to lead the community.
Right.
I do care about the safety of our community, the community that I've grown up in, for the last 49 years and that I've worked in for the last 25 as a peace officer. It really is about a love of service and a love for serving the people. Mm-hmm. And so I knew at that point that I was uniquely qualified to lead the community, lead the sheriff's office. So I started making preparations. I went back and got my master's degree, attended the FBI's National Academy, wow. and just spent the last year working as a law enforcement fellow with the United States Department of Justice at the COPS office, really delving into community-oriented policing and how we can use those strategies here in our communities to reduce crime rates and make our city, our county, a better place to live. And I just decided, I'm willing to do the work. I'm willing to put in the effort. And it is a tremendous amount of effort to prepare yourself to do it, but also to run for an elected office. And then the effort it's going to take to be the sheriff, to be the law enforcement representative and the representative for public safety in Spokane County, it's exhausting. Yeah. And I knew that I had the character and the work ethic to make it happen. So here I am.
And because it's not just about directing the officers underneath you. There's a public service element that goes beyond law enforcement. There's talking to the community, engaging with the community, responding to the community, not necessarily to a 911 call, but hey, I have a question for you. And then sitting down with those community members and engaging with them on a individual level almost. And so that's another qualification in and of itself outside of the law enforcement aspect. I think that, Ozzie's such a personable guy and that people can sit with him and have a cup of coffee or a beer and just say, hey, Ozzie, what's the deal with this? And he'll just shoot you straight. And he doesn't mess around and he gets straight to the point. And I think that's why, and I've never met Ozzie. This is just what I've seen of him in interviews and so on. And on his sheriff's report that Ken Adam does over at Spokane Talks Media, which is fantastic. And I just look at that and I go, man, that's what we need. We need someone who's bold. We need someone who is straight to the point, that will engage with the community and that will stand behind the community in the face of injustice.
Right. And I think you've hit on probably the most critical aspect of being the elected sheriff, is that the sheriff, I will get to be the sole voice for public safety that has a direct line of communication to the public. The public gives the sheriff the authority to do what he does, and the deputies who serve with him get the authority from the sheriff. So that direct tie to the community exists. That's where we get our authority. That's where we get our power. Ozzie understands that, and I think a lot of people who haven't really given a lot of consideration to what being the sheriff of a county would entail, they do think it's about, hey, making sure that the payroll gets done right, that the budget's on target, that, making sure that all the performance measures and all the policies and procedures are correct and that the training happens well. And while that's all critical things that a sheriff has to understand and know and have some experience in, that's up for his staff to do. Right. That's what the sheriff's staff is supposed to do. That's my role.
He takes it on. He delegates.
It's the sheriff's responsibility,
Right.
like you said, to have that contact with the public to make sure that the services his department are delivering are the services that the public needs, and to make sure that they are doing it ethically, making sure they're doing it in a fiscally responsible manner, and that we are developing relationships with the public. It's important for the sheriff to have that relationship. You articulated it very well, that he's supposed to have that contact, not just with criminals, but our deputies need to have that too. And I have a plan that's going to allow us to do that at the street level a little more effectively than we are today. And Sheriff Knezovich completely believes in that theory, but just with staffing issues and other resource issues, it's become very, very complicated in the last 15 years to do it. But we can get back to the policing that was done back in the 50s and 60s, the community-oriented policing that builds trust and relationships with our community. And I think we have great trust between our sheriff's office and our community here. Not total and complete throughout all the different communities, but I know we have the tools and the ability and the professionalism to get there.
So you touched on a couple of points. One was the understaffing issue, and what I've observed, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but Spokane County and the sheriff's office specifically has become kind of a safe haven for those officers who believe in their constitutional right to freedom and medical freedom specifically, because a lot of officers who stood up and said, I will not be mandated into getting a vaccine, they're applying for jobs in Spokane County, and they're coming from all over to come work for the Spokane County Sheriff's Office because they had a sheriff who stood behind the law and stood behind the Constitution. And I think that's important.
It is important. And it's really unfortunate there were some agencies who made bad policy decisions about mandating the vaccine. And I think time will bear out the fact that they went places that weren't necessary. I'm very grateful for a sheriff who and other county leaders who said, there is a way for us to comply with what the law says we have to comply with, but still offer our valuable resources. Our men and women are the most valuable resources we have in the sheriff's office to provide public safety, but come up with policies that allowed them to make their choice, their individual choice about what they wanted to do regarding a vaccine, but yet allow us to keep our work environment safe. And we did a great job with that. I'm very grateful for our county commissioners who made sure that, we knew that our employees were going to be able to make the choice that was best for them and to not negatively impact them financially. We really did everything we could to support the men and women who were working for us. And that's the kind of sheriff I will be, right? I mean, we need to find solutions that work, and we're not going to take people's choices away from them.
Well, and just because we're mandated to stay home, it doesn't mean that criminals are going to stay home. So you still need your sheriffs on the street. You still need the police on the street.
Correct.
So how, people thought, well, is it really that big a deal? Well, yeah, it is, because you're infringing on the rights of individuals, but we still need our sheriffs. So if you impose such a strict, you have to do this or you don't work here, well, then when we have no sheriff and we have no police force, who's to blame? Right. And it's such a big issue. And I was really, throughout that whole ordeal, I was looking at Ozzie and I was like, man, that's a leader right there. He is a leader. And sad to see him go, but I'm glad that we're getting to have this conversation. So this is fantastic. So let's talk a little bit about the budget, actually. So you kind of mentioned the budget. What does that look like right now? We seem to see almost every time there's an election and there's a ballot measure, we seem to see, shall we increase the budget for EMS and for police and fire? And I always check the box, yes. Now, this last time, I got to admit, I was hesitant. The reason I was hesitant is not because I don't support law enforcement. I do. But I thought, gee, man, what are we doing in Spokane County, in the city of Spokane, with our money that we have to continuously tax the taxpayer more and more and more when we have levy after levy after levy? And we should have plenty in the coffers to support and prop up our police department. Now, ultimately, I voted yes because I, in good conscience, couldn't call 911 if I have an emergency, knowing that I had voted no. And I do, like I said, I do support our law enforcement. But what does it look like?
So we we've been very fortunate the last couple of years. The economy has been good. We have county commissioners who have been exceptionally supportive of law enforcement and also the city of Spokane Valley. They also have a say. The elected leaders and the appointed leaders in the Spokane Valley have also been exceptionally supportive of law enforcement. We've been very, very fortunate in that regard. They have not only supported us in word, in 2020 when the whole defund movement and talking negatively about police and law enforcement seemed to be in vogue in a lot of places. Our county commissioners and the Spokane Valley City Council immediately and without hesitation drafted resolutions praising law enforcement and expounding on their support of law enforcement. And that's great in 2020 that they did that, but they followed it up with cash. They have continuously supported funding better equipment, funding better pay for officers. We are, like every other industry right now. I wouldn't do your job
for $50,000.
Well, they won't.
Yeah.
And here's the thing. They knew that many different factors, from the whole defund movement to the legislative changes and the message that was sending to law enforcement, they knew. And plus, there's already a hiring problem for every industry, not just law enforcement. But you take those three factors into place, they knew that we were struggling to bring people in.
Right.
But they made sure that they did everything they could to support law enforcement. And it's because of relationships I had with them, relationships Sheriff Knezovich had with them, that Chief Ellis had with his elected officials, that we were able to make sure that we got the support we needed. And ultimately, they take care of the one thing that was challenging us the most with hiring, and that was getting us a salary and a contract for both our deputy sheriffs and our lieutenants that was competitive with the city police department.
Right.
That last factor alone has made the biggest impact on our ability to attract and hire people to the point where in 18 months, we're going to be fully staffed.
Wow.
It has had a huge impact. Has our budget increased? Yes, it has. Are we using the funds wisely? Yes. Do I believe our county commissioners and the Spokane Valley City Council want to funnel as much cash to our law enforcement and public safety as possible without raising taxes? Yes. The three biggest concerns that our voters have right now is what our recent polling is showing. And it was violent crime, homelessness, and I can't remember what the third issue was.
Property crime, I think.
Well, it might have been property crime,
I think
right?
so.
And certainly that's always been important, and we have a lot of work to do there. But now it's violent crime, number one, inflation, number two, increased taxes, number three.
Right, but you can't handle anything with the second two. So the two of the three.
But what I have to do as a leader is recognize, while we have a need for resources, and we will always be able to use more law enforcement, right? We also have other issues that are coming up on the ballot that we're going to have to put in front of voters. And while it might not necessarily be issues that put more cops on the street, it does help us address the people that we take off the street when we make an arrest. Talking specifically about a jail initiative, right? We're going to need to spend anywhere from $200 to $300 million on a new jail. We're going to have to go to the voters for that.
Right.
So when you say, well, we're understaffed, and we are understaffed, and we could use 100 more deputies on the street if we could hire them. It would take us 5 years to hire 100 deputies over and above what we currently have and what we want. But it's going to add as much as $18 million a year to the budget. And the county doesn't necessarily have that in its coffers in addition to what it needs.
Well, I would argue we do, but we're just spending it in ways that ought not to be spent.
Well, right. And that's the decisions for, the county commissioners and state legislators and things like that. And I, as a sheriff, this is where I get to be a little selfish as the elected sheriff is I get to represent the public safety needs of the people, right? I get to say, I'm that voice. The public is telling me we need more officers. So we can go after it, and then it's up to the legislators to decide, yes, this is what we can support and this is what we can't support. I think our current county commissioners are doing a great job of supporting us while they can. It'll be interesting to see when money gets a little bit tighter and the economy slows down, how that how that changes, if it changes, and it might not.
And you might be a little bit biased, but in my conversations with my friends and so on, and hey, I'm just a guy. I'm a voter,
Yes.
right? I have no position. I've never been an elected official. So when I try to ask these questions, I think, what are the conversations I've had with people that I have sat down with and we talk about? And all of my friends are pro-law enforcement. They have friends in law enforcement, or they know of someone who does, and we're very supportive, I think, as a community even the people that I would think that, oh, this person probably hates the police, they're like, no, like they don't. And which is refreshing, because you think you're going to, oh, here's a conversation. That
Contrary to the
well.
narrative that's being spun in this country, isn't it?
Right, it is. And so you sit and you have these conversations, you think, oh, here we go, we're going to have this. And they're like, no, why would we defund the police? Even the city of Spokane, we're like, no, this is
right.
This is not a good policy. We're not defunding anything, which I know that's not your jurisdiction.
And I think it is. I mean, remember, the sheriff is the sheriff for the entire county. Right. But I think that shows just how, regionally, our attitudes as a culture can be different across this country, for better or for worse.
Right.
But I'm here to tell you, we have a very supportive region of law enforcement, and it goes in part to show what our culture is.
Well,
that's why a locally elected sheriff is so important, because I can represent the values of our community, not the values of a state legislature or from the other side of the state, or a governor, or things like that. It goes back to that whole argument of, is local control better? Well, yes, that this country was set up based on the need for local control, right? The Constitution, the founders recognized how important that is.
Yeah. And the point I was going to make was that me as a voter, I defund everything else before I defund EMS, and period. Whether that's ambulance, police, fire, everything else goes. But we're always going to need our police. Especially, I would even argue that we need our police more in times where inflation is a problem. We're paying $5 at the pump, because it's proven that when hardship comes, it incentivizes people to steal, and it gives them a reason to justify it. They say, well, man, I just had to put $15, and which is 3 gallons of gas, and I can go now 50 miles in my Subaru with this 3 gallons of gas, and 50, 75 miles. That gets me 2 to 3 days worth of driving to and from work. Then they go to the store and they look at their bank account and they go, man, I don't have anything. And so now it's like, well, hey, maybe I could just take this. And they're justifying it not because they're bad people, not because they even want to do it, but they've been pushed into this corner, or they feel that they've been pushed into this corner, and the resources just aren't there to help everyone at that scale. And so now crime rates increase because now you have more people stealing, and that's on a small level.
Well, yeah, and we're not holding anybody accountable. Is the larger issue with the crime rates that we're seeing, is we're not holding anybody accountable for anything. But to your point, there's a couple things to consider, right? We know that the police are important, and we know that fire is completely important. So is emergency medical services. That's fire here. It's the same thing, right? Critically important things. But what we as citizens have to remember is when we talk about criminal justice being the bulk of our general fund dollars being spent, it's not just police and fire. There is a court system that we have to run, right? I mean, constitutionally, we have to run it. Because if the police are out arresting people, then there has to be an incarceration system, there has to be a probation system, there has to be a court system. We have to have those things because the Constitution requires it, right? Yes. So those have to exist as well. And when I talk about, hey, we're going to go for more money, and I'm throwing out a number, let's say 100 cops, and it's going to cost us $17 million a year in perpetuity or more as costs escalate. The rub for some of the county commissioners and other people who have to come up with the dollars for it becomes, that extra 100 cops, that's a 35% increase in
incarceration rate.
Well, and guess what? They're increasing the backload onto the public defenders. They're increasing the backload onto the prosecutor's office. They're increasing the backload onto the court system, the jail system, and everything. And it's a trickle-down effect, and it gets exponentially more expensive. So we have to just make sure when we're considering it, and when we're saying, "Oh, I can't believe it," we just want to focus on police. Well, there's a lot more. That $16 million could end up being hundreds of millions of dollars on the back end.
Yeah.
Right. So, and it's not to say that we can't do it. It's just we have to keep a realistic perspective of what adding here does on the back end. You squeeze the balloon here, what does it look like on the back end?
Actually, a perspective I had never considered, but as soon as you said it, I thought, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Because then you have your county jail intake increases, so now you need more staff there, and then you need more rooms, and so
correct.
And so, but I would also
that's where there's balance, right? You have to find balance,
correct. But the balance comes from how we enforce the law.
100%.
So the balance comes from how we enforce the law, and when you tell police officers that they cannot prosecute someone who is walking down the street, high as a kite, flipping people off, has their junk out, which I've seen. And you're telling them, well, they're just going to come out and we can do I feel like all I can do is give them a pamphlet, and they have I can confiscate what they have, but I don't have the authority to arrest them. How did we get here?
So it's funny you say they feel like that's all they can do. Like literally, that's all our deputies can do.
Yeah,
is refer them to services twice, take their drugs away from them, hope that they're in that narrow mindset. If anybody is familiar with anybody who's caught in the throes of addiction, there's very narrow time bands where they can help identify for themselves that they need treatment and that they will actually go find it. The reality of it is right now, if they do come into contact with the police where we give them the information they need to go to a referral, and let's say they're in that narrow time frame where they're like, yeah, I could go use the help. There's no services available immediately. They have to wait 7 days, 10 days to get into that treatment, and that window's gone by then. That window might be 3 hours. That window might be 18 hours. It might be 36 hours. It's when they have that
moment of clarity, yeah.
We have gotten to the point where as a society, we have to understand that there is a role for arrest in dealing with issues like mental health disorder and substance use disorder. Now, does that mean Sheriff Nowels thinks we should lock everybody up and throw away the key? No, that's not what I'm getting at. We can interrupt the cycles of drug addiction and the cycles of mental health disorder with incarceration. That doesn't necessarily mean it has to look like the Spokane County Jail. It can be a facility that's a lot softer, a lot safer for the people we're putting in there, and a lot safer for the people who are working there. Mm-hmm. And interrupt that cycle long enough to make sure we get them into the services that they need. There is nothing amoral about that. And for some reason, we have been caught in this gap in this country right here. It's not even just a Spokane problem. It is a nationwide problem with this idea that it is inhumane to incarcerate somebody who is suffering from a mental health issue or a substance use disorder. And I would argue that it is completely immoral to allow people to be out on the streets, put themselves in danger, endanger others people when they're in the throes of a mental health crisis or in the throes of a substance use disorder. Yeah. That's the immoral answer. Mm-hmm. We have to correct our thinking on this. We have to say it's okay to incarcerate people temporarily in a facility that is safe, it's clean. Yes, is it going to cost us money? Yes, it is. But it'll help clean up our streets. It'll help allow businesses to stay in business without being harassed by transients, without being harassed by people defecating on their sidewalks, peeing on their buildings, walking around naked, walking around high as kites. It will allow people to go into our downtown areas and into our park areas out here in the more rural parts of the county without being affronted by people who are exhibiting these signs. Yeah. It has to happen. And we have to just say, as a public, it's time for us to stand up and address this. And we do have the willpower here in this community.
I think we do. I think we do in Spokane for sure. And I think it's becoming more and more so that way. We do have an influx of Californians who are leaving California because these issues aren't being addressed. And I think that as the population grows and those people become residents and then they're able to vote in the community, I think that hopefully they'll come here and start looking at what's been happening in California for the last 50 years and go, okay, we don't want that anymore, and start voting as they ought to, which is biblically and constitutionally using those principles and those values to determine how they vote. And so let me ask you this. If I went to a downtown Spokane bar in the middle of the day and I got absolutely hammered drunk and I walked out into the street and I'm cussing at people and everything else and the police show up, would I be arrested?
Yeah, you'd be arrested. Well, here's the thing. You'd have to meet the statutory requirements of disorderly conduct. So you'd have to disrupt the flow of traffic, or you'd have to interrupt a group significantly to the point where if somebody was having a large gathering, and you would have to disrupt it to the point where it would have to stop, right? So would you be arrested? Yes. But remember, arrest does not necessarily mean put in handcuffs and taken to jail. Right? Depending on
driven home, or
well, you could be written a ticket and told, and depending on whether you're ready to de-escalate a little bit or not, that's probably the appropriate response. Now, if you're completely out of control and we can't get you to, behave and be a good, conductive member of society at the time, well, yeah, we can take you to jail on a booking exception, and we've always been able to do that.
Right, and let's say that, so let's take the worst scenario that you could imagine, that I'm doing all of those things, and that I won't de-escalate, and I'm homeless. Would the police now feel like they have the authority to arrest that person that seems to be having a mental breakdown or mental disorder, or maybe is clear, or you've maybe come into contact with him before and he's had a substance abuse issue and you know of this? Would an officer feel comfortable arresting that individual?
Yeah. Well, so here's the thing. You said, do they feel comfortable? I can tell you lawfully they can.
Yes.
Now, due to some of the ambiguous language in some of our recent laws that have been passed, we have officers and deputies who are rightfully maybe second guessing what they do. Now I will tell you.
And I use that language intentionally. Do officers
Correct.
feel comfortable enforcing the law with these individuals who are doing these things?
And what I think it requires of us, and this is what the approach we've taken as a sheriff's office, even before they corrected some of the most egregious laws from the previous 2021 legislative session, even prior to that, our message to our deputies was this: none of the things that were enacted prevented us from de-escalating situations, using time and distance, trying to use all of our resources. In fact, it encouraged us to use all of our resources to avoid using force. Well, that was the culture of the Spokane County Sheriff's Office anyway. Right. So what we had to do at that point was make sure our people had the best training that we could deliver in a very short amount of time, so they could understand the kind of the bright line rules, which there weren't many, which was problematic in that legislation, and said, listen, do what you feel comfortable doing where you don't think you're going to hang yourself out legally and liability wise. I'm not talking about getting, sued. I'm talking about if you don't do anything that you think is going to get you prosecuted by the Attorney General's office and go to prison, because me as a law enforcement leader, I can't go to prison for you. If you get sued, right, we all get sued and the county indemnifies and anything like that. That's okay. It happens. Nobody wants to do that, but it happens. But if you do something that the Attorney General's office or the prosecutor's office is going to perceive as being criminal, when you're just trying to do your job right, then I can't go to jail for you. So do what you need to do to be safe first. Go home at night. Number two, not only to avoid being assaulted or killed, because there are people out there who want to assault and kill the police, but make sure that you're not going to do something that's going to get you criminally charged. Right. And we are not going to second guess them. We're going to give them the best training we can. We're not going to second guess them. And then now that the laws have changed back largely, there's still some ambiguous language that's problematic, and there's the whole pursuit issue that really should be a better policy than it should be, a law. Our officers, it's going to take time for them to understand where those bright lines are and get comfortable operating within them.
Is the pursuit issue, I think I was just mentioning this to someone, the pursuit issue is where I'm doing 120 on the freeway, an officer follows me for a bit, tries to get me to pull over, I refuse to pull over. That officer now feels like, well, I kind of can continue to pursue him because he may crash, kill himself, kill someone else, and then I'm the bad guy for doing my job. Is that what you're referring to?
Well, I think you lost me at the last end, but at the end of the day, you're right. It's not that he can't feel he can't chase them. He legally cannot pursue them. Period. There's a handful of violent crimes that they can be pursued for if you have probable cause, which is a tremendously high legal standard.
It is, yeah.
In a moment. And the difference between probable cause and reasonable suspicion is huge for law enforcement officers. And frankly, the language in the laws was written by people who didn't really understand the difference between those two standards and how it is operationalized at the street level. It was very clear in some of the explanations from some of the legislators who sponsored this that they didn't really understand the difference between probable cause and reasonable suspicion.
Would you mind defining and explaining the differences then?
So reasonable suspicion is, I'm trying to give you an example of it, is, okay, I see a car, I get called to a burglary, right? A burglary in progress, alarms going off, window break. Surveillance camera shows, hey, there's a blue pickup truck and 2 males inside the building. So I'm driving to the scene, and all of a sudden I get passed by a high rate of speed by a blue truck that's occupied by 2 people. I have reasonable suspicion to stop that car for a suspected burglary. Right? I do not have probable cause. Probable cause means more than likely than not, those 2 people in that car committed the act of burglary.
Okay.
That's a pretty high standard for all I know is well, they match the description of the car. I know it's 2 people in there. And if they
I couldn't see if it was a man or a man and a woman.
I have no idea. There's 2 people in the car, right? Good police work, you're going to stop that car. And here's the thing. For today, if they stop, we're still legally good. But let's say they really did do the burglary and they didn't stop for me and they took off. I can't chase them. I can't chase them. Because it is not probable cause. And there were legislators who think, well, that's probable cause. Like, no, it's not. Not on any level is that probable cause. So I think that's where it's important to have relationships built with legislators in law enforcement and have relationships built on trust. So we can go and have those conversations and say, listen, if you're going to do this, this is what it means to us, and we have to educate them. And I don't know that enough of that happened with these last few legislative sessions. I have taken painstaking efforts to make sure and build relationships with our legislators. I've had a couple conversations with Senator Patton, and we align very, very well, with our belief systems, with our political ideologies and things like that. But I also have a relationship and an endorsement from Senator Andy Billig, who we don't necessarily see eye to eye on our political ideology. But you have to have a relationship. So when Senator Billig has a question about this, he has somebody he trusts to come and say, okay, what's the outcome of this going to be?
It's going to cut through. Essentially what you're saying is you're cutting through a party line and you're saying this isn't about ideology or anything. This is about, I'm a law enforcement officer. I have a job to do. I have laws to uphold, and I need the laws on the books that will allow for the safest community possible. And essentially Andy Billig saying, I trust that you're going to do that.
Right. And he trusts that I'm going to give him a non-emotional, thought-out response. Now, what he does with that, right, it's up to him, right? And of course, that's where the relationship is developed or degraded over time, right? It's just, it is so important for us right now in our political country. We have this huge political divide, and there seems to be fewer and fewer people who are willing to step in and say, hold on, I know how to listen, because honestly, we all share the same values largely. Not everybody, right? Yes. There are extremes on both ends of the party that our values get a little murky and they don't necessarily share the same values we all do. But the majority of Americans and the majority of people here in Spokane, we believe in liberty, we believe in freedom. We believe in individual accountability because liberty requires individual accountability. Yeah. Guess what? Andy Billig believes in that too. Most of Andy Billig's constituency believes in that too. And we know if there's a huge component of individual accountability, that those of us who are accountable and those of us who believe and we're faithful, we know, much like Christ, we have to be able to reach down and help people.
Yes.
Right? We know we have an obligation and a duty to do it. Well, I'm here to tell you, every Democrat believes that. Every Republican believes that. We just have to say, listen, that's the focus. How do we meet the needs of our shared values and get to a place that works? And it's not about, hey, well, it's got to be my way. As long as it meets the need, as long as we're helping people, as long as we're holding people accountable and helping them succeed, we have to find solutions that meet that goal.
Right. And this comes... So
and that's the path forward.
Yeah. And there's 2 parts to this, I feel like. One part is the left need to stop demonizing Democrats who cross to the right and say, I want to have a conversation with you about this issue, and I want to sincerely sit down with you for hours and hours and hours until you and I don't, even if you don't see eye to eye, but at least we've been able to compromise and we're able to get in there. And I'm not talking about compromising on values. I'm talking about compromising on, so oftentimes we agree on the problem, we don't agree on the solution. But there is compromise in the solution oftentimes. Now, not morally or anything like, not compromising values or compromising your morality to do so, but in the issues of homelessness, crime, and so on, there can be progress made in these compromises as long as the parties, the left and the right, stop demonizing their colleagues from saying, you ought not go talk to him because he's on the other side. And the Republicans are doing the same. You ought not go talk to him because he's on the other side. It's like, why are you demonizing each other? Go sit in a room with each other for 12 hours and you might actually learn something about each other and have a little bit of respect to sit down and draft legislation that reflects both of your values.
See, you just gave a campaign speech. I like it. When are we going to get you to run for an elected office? I think it's great because you're spot on, and I will take that idea, and I don't know if it's a step further or not, but it's maybe just an aside to it is correct. Let's not demonize people who are willing to step across an aisle and work. But how about this? How about we stop demonizing people? Period.
Right.
In the political realm.
Yeah.
How about we stop making these attacks that are really about philosophy, they're really about our values, they're really about laws, they're things. Mm-hmm. Let's attack those. Yep. Let's attack ideas, and let's not make it personal. Let's not attack Andy Billig. Let's not attack Matt Shea.
Yeah.
Right?
Right.
Let's not make it about Matt Shea.
I don't know Matt Shea. Never met him.
I'm just using that as an example. Let's not attack Donald Trump as an individual. Right. Let's attack Donald Trump's policies.
Correct.
Right?
And that's the biggest caveat. And it's not about, I've heard things of Matt Shea. I've never met him. I'm not going to judge Matt Shea. I've never met him.
Right. And I want to clarify for your viewers.
Right.
I'm not saying Donald Trump deserves to be attacked or his policies even deserve to be attacked. That's not the case. Right. I'm just saying, both sides of the political aisle are demonizing each other, and it has to stop.
It's literally evil.
And is that what we resort to? Is that what we resort to when we can't argue facts and ideologies?
Right.
We need to rise above that and not make it personal on either side, and both sides are guilty of it.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Absolutely.
It's got to stop.
It's got to stop. It has to stop. Well, I mean, the thing that I always rack my brain is I'm British. So when I moved to the United States, I was the guy who felt out of place. I felt like I couldn't. I felt like July 4th wasn't for me because I'm British, and the people around me were like, "Dude, you're missing the point. July 4th isn't a Brit v American thing. America is our country, and it is a nation of all people, and it's made up of all people. And if you come here and you believe in the Constitution, you believe in our principles, our founding principles, you are an American. I mean,
absolutely.
You can be an American by heart halfway around the world and never step foot in this country, but you can look at that light that is American. You can say, that's what I want for my country, right? That's what I want for me. And it took me years to figure this out. And then when I became a citizen, I became an American, right? So, I stand for the Constitution. I stand for liberty because I come from a country where people think England is a free country. England's a free country until you post a rap song, lyrics to a rap song on your Facebook page that have some derogatory slang in it that I didn't write. It was a rapper, and then you go to jail for it. That's not freedom.
Correct.
They don't have freedom of speech there. And this is what I keep telling people is, guys, we're not far behind that if we continue down this spiral. And everyone goes, well, that's crazy. Why would you go to jail for that? They do it in Canada. They do it in the UK.
Yep.
Australia. I mean, guys, we're not part of the Commonwealth, thankfully. But
I have complete faith that Americans will not allow that to happen here. Yes. Are there signs that it could be tipping that way? Yes. But you're also starting to see some pretty significant resistance to those ideas. And I believe all Americans understand the need for our constitutional rights to be protected. period. And that's the great thing about America is it has nothing to do with where you came from. It's you come here. The Constitution was crafted around the idea that every person, whether you're in, and honestly, this directs part of our foreign policy in this country, right?
Right.
Is the fact that these inalienable rights are God-given. It's not God-given to Americans and God-given to you as soon as you set foot on the soil here. No, they're God-given to all of humanity, right? It is. And so if we do this right, this great experiment as it's been called, if we do this right, then it will organically spread around the world. We have to keep showing the world that we can do it and do it well.
Right.
And I don't know, I'd give us maybe a C on that right now. But maybe externally we would be given a C. I think we're better off than what the world perceives. I think the world still doesn't quite understand everything about America. But those are the things that's going to make this country great. And that's what the 4th of July is about. All of that for everybody. It's about individuality in this country. The complete opposite of communism.
So I can wear my red coat on 4th of July?
Yeah, you can absolutely. But you can. That's the great thing about America. You can run down the streets of America and extol the virtues of communism.
Right.
Go for it.
Yeah.
We don't buy it, but go for it.
Yeah.
Right? And people can believe in it. It's not going to work out here in this country. Our values are just different. Right? They're just different. And that's what I love about the values we as Americans hold. I have always been a huge proponent of the individual development, the need to continually grow as an individual. I love helping my employees grow as individuals to better themselves both inside, outside of work. Yeah. I love that goes on with our children. My wife's an educator. I firmly believe that we are all responsible to continue learning and become better individuals throughout our entire life. And the whole system that is America, the Constitution, our system of beliefs are built around the idea that you as an individual can rely on yourself and that the tools are available for you in America. It doesn't matter what race, religion, color, sex, it doesn't matter. If you go in and put in the work, you can be whatever you want to be in the United States.
That's truth.
And it's my job as the sheriff to help support all of that, to help every young man and young woman, no matter what socioeconomic status they are in, that they understand that they wake up every morning and go, if I want to be a doctor, I can be a doctor.
I work hard enough, I can get there.
And it's true of everybody. If I wanted to go be a neurosurgeon tomorrow, John Knowles could quit, go find himself a way to fund it, and I could go be a neurosurgeon. There's nothing in this country holding me back from doing it.
Right. Regardless of race, creed, or anything like that. And
as much as we want to tell some people in this country that they don't have that opportunities, that's a lie.
It is a lie.
The truth of the matter is anybody in this country can do it if they're just told that they can.
Yep, and oftentimes it just takes that one person to. It often just takes one person in that person's life. Sometimes that's a police officer that just says, "Hey, I believe in you. Why are you doing this to yourself? Why are you beating yourself up like this, man? Like you can do whatever you want."
Yep.
And I think that oftentimes people don't truly understand that I have never had a negative interaction with a law enforcement officer. I don't think it's because of the color of my skin. My wife's black. She's been pulled over plenty of times in Spokane County. But she's never thought this cop pulled me over because I'm black. She talks to the police officer. It's often a cordial interaction. It's like, hey, you forgot to renew your tabs. Take care of it. That kind of thing. Okay, thanks, sir. Sorry about that. And off you go. And I've never experienced anything in Spokane County, and nor has she. And she would defend any law enforcement officer in Spokane County. So let's actually jump into, because you kind of brought up.
Okay, can I make one comment on that?
Sure.
So I hope that's the majority of interactions with police nationwide, but particularly in Spokane County. Now I will tell you that it's not always 100% of the time, right? We have to be realistic and say, and I'll be honest, back when I worked the street, there were days where I had a lousy day at home.
Yes.
And I came on shift and I was pretty short with somebody, right? And they might have got some attitude out of me that they wouldn't have any other day. Now, does that mean I needed to be, disciplined and have 5 days off or things like that. Like some people, they would like, yeah, that cop needs to be fired. That deputy needs to be fired. He needs to be, plastered on the news. No. But is it appropriate for that citizen to maybe call into a supervisor and say, hey, I was not probably treated as respectfully as I needed to, and should that supervisor be able to go and have a conversation with that deputy, him or her, and say, hey, just so you know, this is what happened, came in a little hot. If you're having a bad day and you know that you're not in a headspace
to take 10
to go deal with this, go take 10, or hey, you have plenty of time off. Go take the day off. It's not worth it today, right? We have to be able to recognize that while for the most part, 99.9% of the time, we aren't having interactions that are driven, negative interactions that are driven by race, color, religion, creed. We also have to be honest that they do happen. Yeah. And when they do happen, it really does taint the negative interactions that have nothing to do with it.
It's and
we have to have a willingness to absolutely, as law enforcement leaders, address those issues harshly. There is no room for racism or anything else in law enforcement. There's just no room for it.
Well, there's no room for it in society. Yeah. And I think that any well-grounded person who has the ability to just think objectively, critically think and sit back and go, is this because of the color of my skin, or is this because my tabs are expired? But what happens is a lot of the times in not just in the black community, but even in the white community and so on, it's like, it's because I got tattoos. I couldn't see your tattoos, man. Like you went 35 in a 25 through a neighborhood with kids. I'm pulling you over to tell you to quit it. And it's always, there's just this negative, here we go, I'm getting harassed. And so, no, the law enforcement are there to do a job. They are there to enforce the law.
So what, in a situation like that, it's our responsibility as law enforcement officers, and there's an immense amount of training that we have done and we should continue to do in law enforcement to take this approach. All a law enforcement officer can control is his emotions, his perceptions, things like that. I, as a law enforcement officer, I know why I pulled a person over. I know why I stopped them.
Right.
This person, let's say it's because I'm Muslim. That's why you're harassing me. It doesn't matter why I did. I can offer the explanation, and we should offer the explanation in as calm a manner as possible. But at the end of the day, the person on this side, it's their full belief that it was because of this. It's my job as a law enforcement officer to, as best as I can, explain why I'm doing what I'm doing, trying to do it as calm a manner as possible, and let these folks learn over the process of time through the legal process, or even if there's no legal process that goes on, if they want to file a complaint and claim racism, that over time we need to prove that our motivation was this. And we also have to recognize in law enforcement officers at that moment, there's a lot of times people really do believe you're doing it because of the color of their skin. And you have to maybe change your approach because of that belief. Right, wrong, or indifferent, that's real at that moment.
I would say
it takes a lot of emotional maturity to do that.
Right. Well, and because this is a compounding issue, because then you do that, and then you got 5 that you pull over, and it's like cordial, and there's whatever, and then you get another one, and then another hour goes by, and then you get another, and it's like police officers are people too, and it's things wear on people. Correct. You could be of the most resolved moral character, but over time these things will wear on you, and then it's just a matter of time. And it's, again, having that emotional maturity for the officer to say, hey, I can't handle this today, I need to take a minute. But also, I think that it's also the community's responsibility to go into an engagement with an officer, and that's like in a traffic stop, where you have no predispositions about what it is that they're doing, and just let that officer explain themselves. Don't be confrontational. Even if you agree with that, why be confrontational? Just say, okay, give me my ticket, see you later, right?
It's funny that you bring that up, because I was at a community meeting several years ago, and there was a citizen who was making a statement that he thought he did not receive effective police services as a victim because of the color of his skin. And it was very, very interesting to hear his reasoning why, and me full well knowing that it was a property crime that, and I might have made an off the cuff remark. I said, unfortunately, we're very equal opportunity in not enforcing or investigating some property crimes right now. It had nothing to do with the color of your skin. We're not providing great service to anybody, irrespective of the color of their skin. But at the end of the day, that man was not going to be convinced that it didn't have anything to do with his race. And I have to understand it's not my responsibility to convince him at that point. I just have to give as much education as I can over time and keep reiterating it over and over and over. This is it. And it was really, I think it meant something to him to tell him, like, listen, you did not receive great police service. Understood. But it isn't about race. And it's be mad that you received poor police service. Please do. And we understand that. And trust me, it hurts us at our soul as much as it hurts you that we couldn't help you. But it had nothing to do with the color.
And understand, if you got burgled and the people who robbed you are speeding away, that I may not be able to pull them over.
Well, I can try to pull them over, but if they run, I can't do anything about it.
Right, anyway, exactly. So
I got you down a rabbit trail.
No. It just lends to a good point that sometimes police officers can't do things because the law won't allow them.
Correct.
And so we need to be cognitive of that, and we need, as a society, we need to be banging on our legislators. I was going, property crime is a huge problem in Spokane County. I mean, it's absolutely off the scales. I think who was I talking to the other day? They told me where we were, but we're really high up there with property crime in Spokane County.
Yeah, we are, and we have elevated crime rates almost across the board. Our garage burglaries are down, but we're in the red in Spokane County. In most of our property crimes areas, some of our largest increases are in vehicle thefts. There's a lot of different factors that go into that. Our inability to pursue is part of that. And so most people don't know. The way we triage our cases in Spokane County, and this is a system that I'm largely responsible for, and if people don't like the system, then I'm responsible for it and hate me for it. But if you agree that it's the most efficient use of our resources, I can tell you why we do what we do. We get thousands of property crimes reports, tens of thousands of property crimes reports a year. We have limited resources. We have a limited number of detectives, and our resources are nowhere near where we need to be. And we go through about 900 to 1,200 reports a year that we've identified there is something that is solvable about that case, which means there's some shred of information that a detective, if we had a detective to assign it to, could kind of pull on that string and see if we can come to resolution. We have anywhere from 900 to 1,200 property crimes reports that have some solvability factors that we do not work every year. And that's just in Spokane County, Spokane Valley. Wow. They're alone. So there is 1,500, as many as 1,200 potential victims that are not getting a police service that frankly they deserve. So we have to triage which cases we assign out to our detectives, and they're the ones that have the highest levels of solvability, maybe have the highest level of dollar loss. I always made sure we were signing people who were cases that were solvable, whereas burglarizing houses, breaking into cars, stealing cars, things like that, because we have to get as much bang for our buck as possible. If I know I can't physically get to all of these, I need to make sure we're working the cases that we're going to be the most effective at, our chronic offenders, things like that. And we've done a pretty good job of keeping the crime rate in check, but we're slipping. We have fewer detectives and we are authorized for as many officers on the street, and a few more now than we were back in 2007 before the recession. Our investigative division, we have 20-something fewer authorized positions than we did in 2007. And crime rate has gone up.
Hold on. But you're saying 20 fewer authorized positions. Authorized by who?
Paid for, county commissioners.
So the commissioners...
Our plan for 2023 includes increasing that number and getting most of those back. And it was all budgetary before.
Okay.
It was back in the Great Recession. Prior county commissioners, not the current county commissioners, said, hey, listen, you guys have to shave your budget. And we lost them through attrition. We didn't have to lay anybody off.
Right.
But we now have, where we used to have separate units investigating narcotics and property crimes, we've now had to combine them. And they're doing both. It's been an exceptional challenge. Our men and women have stepped up in an amazing way. It has taken a lot to manage that. Our patrol folks, they get angry that maybe we have too many resources in detectives' office, but the reality of it is we have fewer resources in the detectives division than we have in the patrol division. We never cut patrol. We never cut staffing there, and in fact, it has increased the last couple of years. We have just recently added two detectives to the major crimes division and asking for an additional almost 18 more next year. So hopefully we're going to make a dent in that 1,200, right, and up to 1,500 if you include a couple other.
What's the support looking like for the additional 18? Is it there?
Oh, I think in principle, yes. I think our legislators, they're looking at, what's the economy going to do, and again, other factors of, okay, well, we need a new jail, we got a bond, we got to put that on the bond, things like that. Voters are a little itchy about.
Well, let me ask.
I think they want to do the right thing
on the jail front. What is it that has prompted this? We need a new jail. So can you? Because I hear we need a new jail, and I look at it and I go, well, what's wrong with the jail we have? So can you just explain a little bit what the reasoning is behind that?
So there's a couple different reasons. And I think there's a couple important conversations that we as a community need to have with all of the elected officials, and the sheriff has a very, very small role in there. Number one, the current jail was designed as a maximum security. People are not out as often as they need to be. It's dangerous for the inmates. It's tough to supervise people in there safely. It's dangerous for the correctional people, and it has a lot to do with the design and the general age of the building. So no matter what we decide to do as a community, whether it's we need more jail beds, we need fewer jail beds, we need more services and more programs that aren't maximum security, the actual jail facility needs improvement. It's going to allow us to effectively deliver safe correctional services in a better way. We also know that we can maybe release a few more people out into the public safely without them reoffending if we make sure that they have services that are provided to it. And it takes people and it takes programs to assign to them to make sure that they're closely monitored, that they're given the services they needed so they don't recidivate. There is a certain portion of our arrestees and people who are in jail now that could succeed outside of custody. But I think that all of the news articles lately, and probably over the last 10 years, and the policy goes back to 15 years ago at the state level, we all know that there are people who are being released with low or no bond that should not be released out into the community because they're out there reoffending. I mean, we see the news reports all the time. So-and-so is arrested with 1,500 fentanyl pills, 2 firearms, and was released after posting a $5,000 bond.
Yeah, I just saw it,
and then they get arrested 4 days later doing the same thing.
Yeah,
that person should be in jail. And right now, we're within anywhere from 100 to 50 beds of being at capacity between Geiger and the jail downtown. And I'm here to tell you there are probably more than 50 to 100 offenders who shouldn't be out on the street because they're just reoffending. So my suspicion is we would need to have more jail beds currently than we do. Now, again, do they have to be the maximum security jail beds? No. Can they be a jail bed where they're in a community corrections center where they're receiving services and treatment and things like that? Maybe. There's certainly nothing immoral about that answer. But what I think the conversation has to have, and this is a conversation between the county commissioners, city councils, mayors of every entity in Spokane County, and even our federal partners who pay for jail bed space for us, the conversation has to be this. Are we incarcerating the right people? Are there people who are being released today that should be in jail, that if we had a high enough bond, they would be there and they wouldn't be out reoffending and re-victimizing members of the public? There are those people who are getting out. And the second part of that conversation is there a certain part of this jail population that if we had the right services in place could safely be released out into the population? And we come up with those numbers. how many of this, how many of that. That should determine whether we need more jail beds or not this conversation of, I won't even talk to you about a conversation about a new jail if you add a single more bed. It's ridiculous. It's not a principled approach. It has there's no value.
Well, I guess my argument would be that why couldn't we have services in the same building as a jail? So why couldn't we have the jail function as a jail, but then there's a wing of that jail that is, low risk, essentially, almost like medium and maximum. We don't have to build these buildings independently of each other. We could have them connected so that the entire system works and functions almost like a well-oiled machine. It never will, but in theory, and I'm just throwing this out there, I've thought through this because my wife's brother is a repeat offender. He's a drug addict. He's on the streets, he's clean, then he's not, and so on. We've tried to help him a million times, and he doesn't want help. And, I get angry because I think, why not just lock him up? Why not just send him to prison? Because he's clean in prison. That's where he's the cleanest, and he's thoughtful, and he writes letters, and you think, man, this guy has so much potential. But then as soon as he's on the streets, he's using again. He's dealing. He's doing. It's like, why that he doesn't need prison, but it's the only thing that is going to help him. We've tried Teen Challenge, we've tried UGM, everything, but some people just don't want the help. So he's offended right now. He's in jail right now, picked up on a probation charge. He's going to be there for 2 weeks and then released again. And he will violate his probation again, guaranteed. How do we handle those people who have substance abuse issues, don't want to get clean, but then continue to reoffend? At what point do you say, 2 weeks, every time you violate your probation is enough, you're going back to jail for a longer period of time?
So consider this. And this kind of goes back to that facility thing you're talking about. Mm-hmm. And it comes. There's so many factors that have to come into this that be considered, and I'm certainly not an expert in all of them. Mm-hmm. But here's what I understand: we need to get people access to effective substance use treatment. Some of the programs that I'm aware of, when they deliver them to, and it would be interesting, is it your brother-in-law? My
brother-in-law.
Your brother-in-law, is he receiving any kind of substance use treatment?
Everything and anything. 30 days, 90 days, it doesn't work. He needs long-term, suitable treatment. He doesn't need prison, but that's the only solution we have right now. So
correct.
My argument
so when we talk about building a new jail, part of that conversation is what kind of facility, and if you don't want to call it a jail, don't call it a jail. What kind of a facility can we put in place where he can receive long-term inpatient treatment? Because that does work for some people. And that's a challenge when you're delivering substance use treatment in a correctional facility. There's such a very narrow band of people who qualify to receive that treatment because, number one, you can't just bring somebody in the middle of a treatment class. And number two, it doesn't do any good to put them in a treatment facility or a treatment program where they're only there for the first 30 days of it. It's a waste of money. So you have to have people who are convicted and put in prison long enough or jail long enough to be there through that duration of the program. Right. And there's not many of them. But so is part of the solution, number one, and number one, our jail that is currently constituted, the jail downtown, is not set up to house that kind of treatment or anything like that. So can it be partially remodeled? Can we add on to it and things like that to provide that? Sure, we can, and it's not free. And then the question from there becomes, and man, I'm going to lose my train of thought here, right? The train of thought becomes, is there a part of sentencing that can happen? There's all sorts of ideas we can have of, say he gets arrested for possession of a controlled substance. Right now, we're not doing anything about that. We're gonna try to refer him to treatment and hope that they take up the offer and go, which they don't. We know they don't. But what if locally we legislate a controlled substance law that says if you're convicted of possession of a controlled substance, we're going to give you a minimum mandatory sentence of 180 days. I'm making up 180 days. Right. But let's say the most effective in-house treatment for substance use disorder, we'll make it up and say it's 180 days. Then the minimum mandatory sentence is 180 days, and we make sure it is the county's or the city's or the state's responsibility to deliver that treatment to you while you're there.
Yeah,
and it could be 2 years. I don't know. What I'm telling you is,
I'm in favor of instead of incarcerating, we send them to long-term treatment. It's like your sentence is you go to long-term treatment and you don't get a pass. You don't get to just leave Teen Challenge. You don't get to just leave UGM, whether you like it or not. And it can be like you said.
There has to be accountability.
It doesn't have to be maximum security. He isn't my brother-in-law. He's not a risk. He doesn't want to hurt anyone. He just has an addiction.
Just himself.
He just wants to hurt himself. And so then, okay, well, how do we help him? Well, incarceration doesn't help. The programs in prison don't help. There are proven and viable programs, UGM, Teen Challenge, the Ranch Out in Idaho. These people have worked on these things and they have good success rates over a long period of time. Instead of sending them to...
experts will tell you that forced treatment does work.
Yeah. Well, in prison doesn't... putting him in prison doesn't help. What helps is it helps because it keeps him clean.
But here's the thing. We have to be careful about what we say prison is, or hey, a minimum mandatory sentence.
Right.
Like a minimum mandatory sentence, a lot of people are like, oh, behind bars in jail. Well, no, a minimum mandatory sentence could be you're going to go to this facility that exists outside of the county's control, and you have to stay there. If you leave, there's a penalty. And something that Sheriff Knezovich would tell you is there better be a jail bed available for the person who decides to leave.
Yes.
Right?
Yep.
Because if they don't want to take care of it, well, then there needs to be a jail bed. And maybe we start all over again.
Yeah, and then and there is again, it comes back to personal accountability.
100%.
Hey, you broke the rules. You knew what the rules were when you were sentenced. Yeah. We put you here because we can see based on your record that you need help because everything's substance abuse related. You need help, and then you broke the rules.
Yes.
So now you're back to jail, and we're going to go again, and it's what's happening anyway. Yeah. But instead of sending them to prison, send them to an actual program that will help them. Fund UGM instead of funding the prison system. Fund UGM. They will take those taxpayer dollars and spread it way further than we could in the public prison system.
So here's an interesting thing. It's fun having this conversation with you. It is great. And I guarantee you we could have the same conversation with Democrats on the other side of the aisle, and they would be in agreement with us on almost every one of these points. Why aren't we doing it?
I don't know. That's the good question. Well, hey, we'll leave it there. John, thanks for hearing me out, and thanks for coming on and interviewing with us as well. Can you just let people know where to find you, how to get in contact with you if they have any questions?
So you can go to my website, is John Nowels, JohnNowels, FOR, Sheriff, SHERIFF.com. You can look for me for John Nowels for Sheriff on Facebook, on Instagram. And then again, you can once you get to my website, there's ways you can reach out and contact me directly. My campaign phone is my personal cell phone number is 509-954-8869. Feel free to call me. You call me at 2:00 in the morning, you might get a weird conversation while I'm trying to wake up, but it wouldn't be the first time.
All right, so John Nowels for Sheriff. You're going to have to change that number after the election, I'm sure. So NowelsForSheriff.com.
John Nowels for Sheriff.
John Nowels for Sheriff, okay.
John, no, you know what? You're right. It is NowelsForSheriff.com.
NowelsForSheriff.com. And so you can find John at NowelsForSheriff.com. Yep. Thanks, John.
Thank you.